September 25, 1944. London, 10 Downing Street. The war rooms beneath the streets of Westminster are quieter than they've been in months. Winston Churchill stands beside a large map table, teacup in hand, watching the morning light filter through reinforced windows. For the first time since 1939, the war feels like it might actually be ending. France is liberated. Allied armies are pressing towards the Rhine River. The last great barrier before the German heartland seems within reach. But in the next 60 seconds, everything Churchill believes about this war is about to shatter. A young aide enters the room. He is pale. He carries a folder marked "Urgent Market Garden Eyes Only." Churchill takes it without a word, opens it. His face changes. The teacup pauses halfway to his lips. He sets it down slowly. "How many?" His voice is almost a whisper. The aide swallows hard. "Approximately 10,000 casualties, sir. The 1st Airborne Division at Arnhem. They have been nearly destroyed. The bridge. We could not hold it. They have been evacuated. What is left of them?" Churchill does not move. He stares at the report. 10,000 British casualties in 9 days. For a bridge they did not capture. An operation that was supposed to end the war by Christmas has just become one of the bloodiest Allied failures since D-Day. And then Churchill asks a question that will change the course of military history. Where is General Patton right now? General Hastings Ismay, Churchill's chief of staff, steps to the map, points to a position east of Nancy, deep in eastern France, approaching the German frontier. "Here, sir. 3rd Army captured Nancy 4 days ago. They are advancing toward the German border." Churchill stares at the map. At Montgomery's positions in Holland. At Patton's positions 200 miles south. He sets the Market Garden folder down on the table like it weighs 1,000 pounds. "Get me the fuel allocation reports, Montgomery's and Patton's. I want to see exactly what we gave them." What Churchill is about to discover will ignite a political firestorm that nearly fractures the entire Allied command structure. Because the numbers he is about to read will reveal something that no one in London or Washington wants to admit. The reports arrive within 20 minutes. Churchill spreads them across the table. Ismay stands beside him, reading over his shoulder. The numbers are stark, undeniable, devastating. Operation Market Garden, September 17th through 25th, 1944, 9 days. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's 21st Army Group received absolute priority for supplies, 400 tons of fuel per day. Every truck, every gallon, every available resource funneled north to support the largest airborne operation in history. The goal was simple: capture a series of bridges across the Netherlands, cross the Rhine at Arnhem, drive into Germany's industrial Ruhr region, end the war by Christmas. The result was catastrophic. The British 1st Airborne Division dropped at Arnhem on September 17th. They were supposed to hold the bridge for 2 days until ground forces arrived. But the ground forces never made it. German resistance was far stronger than intelligence predicted. 2 SS Panzer Division's veterans of the Eastern Front, experienced and deadly, were refitting near Arnhem. No one had told the paratroopers. The British paratroopers fought for 9 days. Surrounded, outnumbered, running out of ammunition and medical supplies. On September 25th, the survivors were evacuated across the Rhine in the middle of the night, paddling across in flimsy boats while German machine guns tore the water around them. Out of 10,000 men who dropped at Arnhem, only 2,000 made it back. Total Market Garden casualties: over 10,000 men. Total territorial gain: 64 miles into Holland. Total strategic objectives achieved: 0. The Rhine Bridge at Arnhem. The prize, the reason for the entire operation, remained in German hands. Churchill looks at the second report. His hands are trembling now. 3rd Army operations, same dates. September 17th through 25th, General George Patton's 3rd Army. 700 tons of fuel per day, exactly half what Montgomery received. Operating 200 miles south. advancing through Lorraine toward the German border. No special resources, no priority. In fact, Patton had been complaining for weeks that he was being deliberately starved of fuel while Montgomery got everything. The result was the exact opposite of Market Garden. In those same 9 days while Market Garden was collapsing, Patton's Third Army captured 12 fortified cities: Nancy, Luneville, Château-Salins, Pont-à-Mousson. They crossed 3 rivers: the Moselle, the Meurthe, the Mortagne. They advanced 60 miles. They took 45,000 German prisoners. They inflicted an estimated 55,000 German casualties through combat and capture. Third Army casualties, approximately 100 men. Churchill reads the numbers again, then again. He removes his glasses, rubs his eyes, puts the glasses back on, reads them one more time. "Pug," he says quietly to Ismay. "Tell me if I am reading this correctly." Ismay hesitates. "Sir, I verified the figures with 3 separate sources. Just tell me." Montgomery received 400 tons of fuel per day. He advanced 64 miles in 9 days, 7 miles per day on average. He suffered 10,000 casualties. He achieved none of his strategic objectives. Churchill nods slowly. And Patton 700 tons per day, half. He advanced 60 miles, nearly the same distance, while conducting 3 major river crossings and capturing 12 cities. 2,000 casualties. 45,000 enemy prisoners. And according to the latest reports, he is now positioned less than 20 miles from the German border near Saarbrücken. Churchill walks to the map, to the Epaules, traces the supply routes with one finger. Every truck, every ton of fuel, every priority shipment went north to Montgomery for Market Garden. Meanwhile, Patton, operating on half rations, won battle after battle after battle. He turns to Ismay. His voice is dangerously calm. "Get me General Eisenhower on the telephone. Immediately." The secure line connects at 10:00 a.m. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force. Versailles, France. General Dwight Eisenhower is in a staff meeting when his aide interrupts to say the Prime Minister is on the line. Eisenhower knows immediately this will not be pleasant. Churchill only calls directly when something is very wrong. "Good morning, Prime Minister." "Ike." Churchill's voice is clipped, formal, cold. "I need you to explain something to me, and I assure you I will need to explain this to Parliament within 48 hours, so I would appreciate clarity." "Of course, sir. Why did we authorize an operation that consumed our entire logistical capacity and delivered us the single bloodiest week since D-Day?" There is a pause. Eisenhower's staff, listening on extensions, exchange nervous glances. Prime Minister Market Garden was a calculated risk. Field Marshal Montgomery believed, and our intelligence supported, that German resistance in the north was collapsing. The plan was to exploit that weakness with a rapid thrust supported by airborne forces. I attended the briefings, Ike. I know what the plan was. What I need to understand is why General Patton is capturing German cities with half the fuel, while Monty is taking casualties with all of it. Eisenhower chooses his words carefully. George's sector faces lighter opposition. The Saar region is not as heavily defended as the Rhine crossings. The strategic importance. Do not insult my intelligence. 45,000 prisoners is not light opposition. Those are entire divisions. Patton is destroying German units. Montgomery lost an entire airborne division trying to capture one bridge. Winston, I understand your frustration. Do you? Because here is what I am seeing. I am seeing that we gave Montgomery everything he asked for. Absolute priority. 400 tons of fuel per day, elite airborne divisions, total air superiority, and he produced a disaster. Meanwhile, we gave Patton half that amount, and he is knocking on Germany's door. So help me understand the logic. Eisenhower sighs. It is barely audible over the phone, but Churchill hears it. Monty has requested a meeting to discuss future operations. He believes that with renewed resources, a concentrated push toward the Ruhr. More resources. After this, Churchill's voice rises. Ike, here is what I want you to tell Field Marshal Montgomery. The Prime Minister's office would very much like to understand why the general who demanded absolute priority for 9 days has produced absolute disaster. Can you convey that message, Winston? I need to be frank with you. Publicly criticizing Montgomery right now could fracture Allied unity at a critical moment. Allied unity did not save those paratroopers at Arnhem, and unity does not win wars. Ike. Results. Do. Patton gets results. Why are we punishing him for Montgomery's failures? Eisenhower's voice is tight now. I am not punishing anyone. I am trying to maintain a coalition. Then maintain it with competence, not politics. I will be visiting France next week. I want to tour both sectors, Montgomery's and Patton's. I want to see for myself where our resources went. Churchill hangs up before Eisenhower can respond. Ismay watches Churchill light a cigar with shaking hands. The Prime Minister stares at the map for a long moment. Get me the casualty lists, he says quietly. All of them. Every name. I want to know exactly who we lost at Arnhem. Within 24 hours, the British press has the story. The Daily Telegraph runs a front-page headline. Arnhem 10,000 casualties in failed Rhine crossing. By noon, every newspaper in Fleet Street has reporters demanding answers. By evening, they have the fuel allocation numbers. Someone leaked them. Probably from Churchill's office, though no one can prove it. The questions start immediately. Why was Montgomery given every resource while Patton was starved? Why did the Prime Minister approve an operation that cost 10,000 men for zero gain? Why are American generals succeeding while British generals fail? Labour MPs begin preparing questions for Parliament. Churchill's office receives over 300 letters in 2 days from families demanding explanations. Mothers, wives, sisters. Why did my son die for Montgomery's vanity? Why was not the intelligence about German tanks taken seriously? Why are we losing men while the Americans are winning? At Supreme Headquarters in Versailles. Eisenhower's staff is in crisis mode. Montgomery arrives on September 28th, demanding a private meeting. It lasts 3 hours. Voices are heard through the closed door. Montgomery's tone is defensive, insistent. He blames the weather, unexpected German resistance, intelligence failures, the Polish paratroopers who were supposed to reinforce Arnhem but dropped in the wrong location. When Montgomery finally leaves, face rigid, jaw-clenched, Eisenhower's Chief of Staff, General Walter Bedell Smith, enters the office. Ike looks exhausted. How bad, Smith asks. He wants another offensive. Full resources. Single thrust toward the Ruhr. He says Market Garden failed because we did not give him enough. Smith stares in disbelief. He lost 10,000 men with absolute priority. And he wants more. He says Patton's success is irrelevant because the Saar is not strategically important. Smith shakes his head slowly. George took 45,000 prisoners. That is not irrelevant. That is devastating to German combat power. Eisenhower rubs his temples. Churchill is coming. He wants to tour both sectors. That is going to be a disaster. I know, but they do not know the half of it. Because what Churchill is about to see in France will change everything he believes about this war, and about the men fighting it. What happens when the Prime Minister of Great Britain stands on the banks of the Rhine and stares at the bridge his men died trying to capture? What happens when he visits Patton's sector and sees 12 liberated cities? What happens when 2 of the most powerful men in the Allied command structure have a confrontation that nearly shatters the alliance? In Part 2, we will witness the most dramatic showdown of World War II. Not between enemies, but between allies. Churchill versus Montgomery, and only one of them will walk away with his reputation intact. In Part 1, we witnessed Churchill discover the devastating truth about Operation Market Garden. 10,000 British casualties. 0 strategic objectives achieved. Meanwhile, General Patton captured 12 cities with half the fuel. Now Churchill is flying to France to confront Montgomery face to face. And what happens next will shake the foundations of the Allied command structure. But here is what no one expected. Montgomery is not going to apologize. He is not going to accept responsibility. In fact, he is about to demand even more resources. And Churchill is about to lose his temper in a way that will be remembered for decades. October 1st, 1944. Churchill makes an unannounced visit to France. He flies into Versailles and goes directly to Eisenhower's headquarters. British and American generals gather nervously in the conference room. The tension is thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone knows why the Prime Minister is here. Everyone knows what he has seen in those reports. Churchill enters carrying a bound report. Thick, official, stamped with the War Office seal. He sets it on the conference table with a heavy thud that echoes through the silent room. "Gentlemen," he says, "I have had my staff compile a comprehensive analysis of operations from September 17th through 25th. I thought it might be useful for our discussion." He opens the report. The first page is a comparison chart. 2 columns, side by side. The numbers are brutal. Operation Market Garden, 21st Army Group. Fuel allocation, 400 tons per day. Casualties, 10,005. Cities captured 0. Rivers crossed 0. Strategic objectives achieved 0. Enemy prisoners, 3,200. Territorial gain, 64 miles. Final position, Nijmegen, Netherlands. 1 bridge short of goal. 3rd Army operations. Same dates. Fuel allocation, 700 tons per day. Casualties, 100. Cities captured, 12. Rivers crossed 3. Strategic objectives achieved multiple. Enemy prisoners, 45,000. Territorial gain, 60 miles. Final position, German border near Saarbrücken. Churchill looks around the room. British officers stare at the table. American officers try not to look smug. The silence is deafening. "I have one question," Churchill says, "and I need someone to answer it honestly. How is this possible?" No one speaks. "We gave Montgomery everything. Every resource. Every priority. And George Patton, with half the fuel, produced results that make Market Garden look like a training exercise gone wrong. So I will ask again, how is this possible?" Eisenhower clears his throat. "Prime Minister, the operational contexts are different. Montgomery faced entrenched SS divisions. So did Patton." Churchill's voice is sharp. "The 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division at Nancy. He destroyed it in 3 days. The terrain in Holland is flat, ideal for armor. Patton crossed 3 rivers and fought through the Vosges foothills. So no Ike. I do not accept terrain as an explanation." A British general, one of Montgomery's staff officers, speaks up carefully. "Prime Minister, if I may, Field Marshal Montgomery's objective was more ambitious. A single thrust deep into enemy territory requires competence." Churchill interrupts. "Which brings me to my next question. I am visiting the front tomorrow. I will be touring the Market Garden battlefield with Field Marshal Montgomery. And then I will be visiting General Patton's sector. I suspect the contrast will be illuminating." October 2nd, 1944, the Netherlands. Churchill's motorcade arrives in the staging area for Market Garden. The operation ended 1 week ago, but the evidence of disaster is everywhere. Destroyed gliders lie scattered across muddy fields like broken toys. Burned-out vehicles line the roads. Temporary graves marked with helmets and rifles stand in neat rows, hundreds of them. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery meets Churchill at the headquarters tent. He is impeccably dressed as always. Confident posture, but there is tension in his jaw, a tightness around his eyes. "Prime Minister, I am glad you could visit. I think once you see the situation firsthand, you will understand the challenges we faced." Churchill says nothing. He simply gestures toward the nearest jeep. "Show me." They drive north along the highway the British armored divisions were supposed to use to reach Arnhem. Hell's Highway, the soldiers call it. The road is lined with destroyed tanks. British, American, German. Every few miles there are craters from German artillery, burned bridges that engineers are still repairing. Montgomery explains as they drive. "The intelligence failure was significant, Prime Minister. We had no indication of SS Panzer divisions in the area. The 9th and 10th SS were supposed to be refitting in Germany. But they were here, near Arnhem, at full strength." "You were warned," Churchill says quietly. Montgomery pauses. "I am sorry, Dutch resistance. They reported German armor. You dismissed it. The intelligence was inconclusive. Resistance reports are often exaggerated." Churchill turns to look at Montgomery directly. 500 men of the 1st Airborne Division are dead or captured because you decided inconclusive intelligence was not worth considering. Montgomery's face hardens. "Prime Minister, with respect, command decisions in combat require—" "I am not interested in lectures on command decisions, Bernard. I am interested in why you made the wrong ones." They reach the Nijmegen Bridge, the farthest point Market Garden achieved. American paratroopers of the 82nd Airborne captured this bridge in a heroic assault, crossing the Waal River in flimsy canvas boats under heavy fire. Dozens died. But they took the bridge. It is one of the few successes of the entire operation. Churchill stares north. 10 miles away, barely visible in the distance, is Arnhem. The bridge too far. "This is where it ended," Montgomery says. "We held here. If the 1st Airborne could have held Arnhem for just one more day." "They held for 9 days, Bernard. 9 days surrounded by SS Panzer divisions. They held longer than anyone thought possible. The failure was not theirs. It was yours." Montgomery stiffens. "Prime Minister, I resent. I am not finished." Churchill turns to face him directly. His voice drops to a cold whisper that is somehow more frightening than shouting. "Yesterday I visited Nancy. Do you know what I saw there?" Montgomery says nothing. "I saw a city that General Patton captured 4 days ago, with 700 tons of fuel per day, half what you had. The city was intact. Civilians were returning. American engineers were already repairing infrastructure. And do you know what General Patton told me when I asked about his casualties?" Montgomery's jaw clenches. He said, "Acceptable, Mr. Prime Minister. We keep moving, and they cannot hurt us." Then he showed me his maps. 12 cities, 3 rivers, 45,000 prisoners. All in the same week, you lost 10,000 men for one bridge you did not capture. "The situations are not comparable," Montgomery says tightly. "You are right," Churchill replies. "They are not. Because Patton won, and you lost." That evening, Churchill insists on visiting Arnhem itself. The town is still partially held by German forces, so they can only approach the southern bank of the Rhine. Across the river, the Arnhem Bridge stands intact, covered with German vehicles and troops, mocking them. The British paratroopers fought for 9 days to hold the northern end of that bridge. They were evacuated 1 week ago. What was left of them? Churchill stands on the riverbank and stares across the water. The sun is setting. The bridge casts a long shadow. Montgomery stands beside him, silent. After a long moment, Churchill speaks. "A bridge too far. That is what they are calling it. Arnhem. The soldiers, they are saying it was a bridge too far." Montgomery does not respond. Churchill turns to him. His voice is tired now, sad. "I am starting to think it was not the bridge that was too far. It was the ambition without the ability to match it." They return to the temporary headquarters in Eindhoven, a large tent, maps covering every surface. Eisenhower is there, General Ismay, several staff officers. The atmosphere is suffocating. Churchill sits, lights a cigar, looks at Montgomery. Bernard. I want you to answer a question, and I want you to answer it truthfully. Montgomery nods stiffly. Why did Market Garden fail while Patton succeeds Prime Minister? As I have explained, the situations are not comparable. I faced two SS Panzer divisions that intelligence failed to identify. General Patton faces disorganized rear guard units in a secondary sector. 45,000 prisoners, Churchill interrupts. In 1 week. Were those disorganized rear guard units kind enough to surrender voluntarily? Or did Patton have to fight actual German divisions to capture them? Montgomery's face flushes red. Patton's sector. Let us discuss intelligence. Churchill continues. You were warned about German armor near Arnhem, Dutch resistance, aerial reconnaissance. You dismissed it. Why? The intelligence was inconclusive. I made a command decision based on the strategic opportunity. The strategic opportunity to do what exactly? Lose an entire airborne division. The room goes completely silent. Eisenhower shifts uncomfortably. Ismay stares at his notes. Montgomery's hands are shaking. That is an insulting oversimplification, Montgomery says. His voice is barely controlled. Then simplify it for me. Churchill leans forward, his cigar forgotten, his eyes locked on Montgomery. You had priority. You had supply. You had elite troops. The finest paratroopers Britain has ever produced. Men who fought for 9 days against impossible odds because they trusted you to send help. You had complete air superiority. You had every advantage any commander could dream of. Patton had half your fuel and won battles every single day. So simplify it. Field Marshal. Why did you fail? I did not fail. Montgomery's voice is rising now, his composure cracking. We achieved significant territorial gain. We drew German forces north, relieving pressure on other sectors. We prevented a German counteroffensive. You lost 10,000 men. Churchill says each word like a hammer blow. For a bridge you do not have. For a river you did not cross. For an objective you did not achieve. And while you were losing those men, George Patton was liberating French cities and taking German prisoners by the tens of thousands. Now I must go to Parliament next week and explain this to the British people. And frankly, Bernard, I am struggling to find an explanation that does not make you look incompetent. Eisenhower interrupts nervously. Gentlemen, recriminations will not help. Churchill does not look away from Montgomery. I am not recriminating Ike. I am evaluating, and my evaluation is this. We gave Montgomery the chance to be Patton. He proved he is not. Montgomery stands abruptly. His chair scrapes loudly against the floor. If the Prime Minister believes I am unfit for command, sit down, Bernard. Churchill's voice is suddenly still. Quiet. More dangerous than any shout. I am not finished. Montgomery sits. His face is rigid, white. Every officer in the tent is staring at the floor, the maps, the ceiling, anywhere except at the two men locked in this confrontation. Churchill takes a long pull on his cigar. When he speaks again, his voice is quieter, colder, more devastating than anything that came before. Here is what I will tell Parliament. Operation Market Garden was a gamble, a bold gamble, and it failed. Wars are not won by gambling field marshal. They are won by generals who deliver results with the resources available, not by generals who demand all the resources and deliver nothing but condolences. He stands, looks around the room at the assembled officers. George Patton is that general. He takes what you give him and wins. You, Bernard, are not. The silence that follows is suffocating. Montgomery's face is white. Eisenhower looks like he wants to be anywhere else on Earth. Ismay is writing notes with extraordinary focus, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Churchill walks to the tent entrance, pauses, turns back. One more thing. I understand General Bradley has requested increased fuel allocation for Third Army. I will be recommending to the combined Chiefs of Staff that we approve it. Immediately. And he leaves. Montgomery sits motionless for a full minute. Then he stands. nods curtly to Eisenhower, and walks out without a word. Eisenhower looks at his staff. The exhaustion on his face makes him look 10 years older. Well, that could have gone worse. No one laughs. The political earthquake that follows reshapes Allied strategy for the rest of the war. Montgomery retains his command. Firing him would create a British political crisis that Churchill cannot afford. But his influence is shattered. The single-thrust strategy he has been advocating, concentrate all resources on his front for one massive push into Germany, is permanently rejected. Eisenhower's broad front approach becomes official policy. Every sector advances. No more priority for Montgomery. Within a week, Patton's Third Army receives increased fuel allocations. By mid-October, they have advanced another 40 miles. By November, they are positioned along the German border, preparing to assault the Siegfried Line fortifications. Montgomery's 21st Army Group spends October and November clearing the Scheldt estuary to open the port of Antwerp. Vital work. But unglamorous. No headlines, no glory. Just mud and casualties and grinding progress. The headlines belong to Patton. But this is not the end of the story. Because in December 1944, something happens that no one expected. Hitler launches his final desperate gamble. The Battle of the Bulge, the largest German offensive since 1940. And suddenly everything changes. American forces at Bastogne are surrounded. The Germans are advancing. The Allied line is buckling. Eisenhower calls an emergency meeting. The situation is critical. Who can relieve Bastogne? Montgomery, commanding to the north, says he will need 3 weeks to organize a proper counteroffensive, proper planning, proper supply, proper preparation. Patton looks at the map, studies it for exactly 30 seconds. I can be there in 48 hours. Eisenhower stares at him. George, that is impossible. You would have to turn your entire army 90 degrees north in the middle of winter, through snow, through ice, through frozen roads. 48 hours. Patton repeats. Give me the word, and I will have 3 divisions moving by tomorrow morning. And here is where the legend becomes reality. Here is where George Patton proves once and for all that he is not just a good general. He is one of the greatest military commanders in history. But can he actually do it? Can he turn an entire army in 48 hours and save the men trapped at Bastogne? In Part 3, we will witness the impossible become possible. We will see Patton race through blizzards. We will see the relief of Bastogne. And we will see Churchill's final verdict on the 2 generals who defined the Western Front. The clock is ticking. The Germans are closing in. And everything depends on one man. In Part 1, Churchill discovered the devastating truth about Market Garden. 10,000 casualties. 0 objectives achieved. In Part 2, he confronted Montgomery, directly humiliating the Field Marshal in front of the entire Allied command. Patton received his fuel. Montgomery lost his influence. The broad front strategy became official policy. But now, something is happening that no one predicted. December 16, 1944. Hitler launches his final desperate gamble. 250,000 German soldiers pour through the Ardennes forest. The largest German offensive since 1940. American forces are caught completely by surprise. The line is breaking. And at Bastogne, 18,000 American soldiers are surrounded with no way out. This is no longer about fuel allocations and staff meetings. This is about survival. The German offensive hits like a thunderbolt. Intelligence had predicted a quiet winter. The Ardennes was considered a rest sector. Exhausted American divisions were sent there to recover. Green replacements were sent there to train. No one expected an attack. They were wrong. 3 German armies crash through the thin American lines. Panzers roll through snow-covered forests. SS troops in white camouflage advance like ghosts. Within 48 hours, the Germans have created a bulge 50 miles wide in the Allied front. American units are scattered. Communications are cut. Chaos spreads. At Bastogne, A critical crossroads town, the 101st Airborne Division and elements of the 10th Armored Division dig in. They are surrounded, outnumbered 5-1, running low on ammunition, food, and medical supplies. The Germans demand surrender. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe sends back a one-word reply: nuts. But defiance alone cannot save Bastogne. They need relief. They need it fast. And the only general who might be able to deliver it is 100 miles south, facing the wrong direction. December 19, 1944. Verdun, France. Emergency meeting at Allied headquarters. Eisenhower has gathered his top commanders. The atmosphere is grim. Maps show the German penetration growing by the hour. Bradley looks shaken. His 12th Army Group has been split in two. Devers is worried about his exposed flank. Everyone is talking about defensive positions, consolidation, buying time. Everyone except Patton. When Patton enters the room, he is not worried. He is smiling. Eisenhower notices, "George, I am not sure this is a time for optimism." Patton walks to the map. "Hell, Ike, this is the best thing that could have happened. The Germans have stuck their heads in a meat grinder, and I am going to turn the handle." The room goes quiet. Eisenhower studies the map. When can you attack north to relieve Bastogne? The staff officers exchange glances. Patton's Third Army is currently attacking eastward toward the Saar. To relieve Bastogne, he would need to disengage from the enemy, turn his entire force 90 degrees north, move over 100 miles in winter conditions, and launch an attack against elite German formations. Standard military doctrine says such a maneuver would take weeks to plan and execute. Patton does not hesitate. December 22nd. 3 divisions. That is 3 days from now, someone says. I know what day it is. George Eisenhower says carefully. You are talking about turning an entire Army Corps in the middle of winter. Snow, ice, frozen roads. The logistics alone. The logistics are already handled. My staff has been planning this since the 17th. We have 3 contingency plans depending on when you give the word. We can move 48 hours after you say go. Eisenhower stares at him. You started planning before the meeting. I started planning before you called the meeting. When I heard about the breakthrough, I told my staff to start working. We have been ready for 2 days. The room is silent. This is not how generals are supposed to operate. You do not plan major offensive operations on speculation. You do not turn armies on a whim. You do not promise the impossible and then deliver, unless you are George Patton. Eisenhower makes his decision. Do it. And now begins the most remarkable military movement of World War II. December 19, 1944, 10:00 p.m. 3rd Army Headquarters, Nancy, France. Patton issues the orders. The 4th Armored Division, the 26th Infantry Division, the 80th Infantry Division. All 3 will disengage from current operations, turn north, and advance toward Bastogne. They will move through the night. They will move through snow. They will move through enemy territory, and they will arrive in 3 days. The math is staggering. 100,000 men, 133,000 vehicles, moving 100 miles through winter conditions, changing direction 90 degrees while maintaining combat readiness. The supply lines must be completely reorganized. Fuel dumps must be relocated. Ammunition must be redistributed. Medical stations must be moved. Patton's staff has already done it all. December 20th, 1944. The movement begins. Snow is falling. Temperatures drop below freezing. Roads are sheets of ice. Visibility is measured in yards, not miles. German reconnaissance aircraft cannot see the movement through the clouds. German intelligence does not believe it is happening. They are wrong. The 4th Armored Division leads the advance. Sherman tanks push through snowdrifts. Infantry rides on these backs of vehicles freezing but moving. Engineers work ahead of the column, clearing obstacles, marking routes, keeping the army flowing north. At Bastogne, the situation is deteriorating. German artillery pounds the perimeter. Supplies are running out. The wounded cannot be evacuated. On December 22nd, the weather finally clears enough for a desperate airdrop. C-47 transports fly through German flak and drop 144 tons of supplies. It is enough to keep fighting. Barely. General McAuliffe sends a message. Hurry. December 22nd, 1944. Third Army is in position. 3 days. Exactly as Patton promised. 100,000 men. 100 miles. In the worst winter conditions Europe has seen in decades. And now, they attack. The 4th Armored Division strikes north toward Bastogne. German forces are caught off guard. They expected the relief attempt to come from a different direction. They expected it to take weeks. They did not expect George Patton. The fighting is brutal. German defenders are dug in along every road. Every village is a fortress. Every crossroads is contested. But the 4th Armored keeps pushing. They cannot stop. The men at Bastogne cannot wait. December 23rd. 5 miles gained. Heavy casualties on both sides. December 24th. Christmas Eve. The attack continues through the snow. German resistance stiffens. A task force under Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams pushes ahead of the main force. His Sherman tanks are low on fuel. His infantry is exhausted. But they keep moving. December 25th. Christmas Day. German counterattacks hit the advancing columns. The 4th Armored is stretched thin. Some units are cut off. The advance slows to a crawl. At headquarters, staff officers wonder if they should pause and consolidate. Patton refuses. Keep moving. The men at Bastogne are counting on us. December 26, 1944. 4:45 p.m. Lieutenant Colonel Abrams and his task force reach the outskirts of Assenois, a small village 2 miles from Bastogne. German defenders block the road. Infantry and anti-tank guns wait in ambush. The smart move would be to wait for reinforcements, to plan a proper attack, to minimize casualties. Abrams does not wait. Charge. His tanks crash through the German positions at full speed. Sherman tanks blast buildings. Infantry follows behind, clearing the rubble. German soldiers scatter. Within 20 minutes, Assenois is captured. Abrams pushes on. 2 more miles. The road ahead is clear. And then through the snow and smoke he sees them. American soldiers. Paratroopers of the 101st Airborne. Waving, cheering. The siege of Bastogne is broken. The news reaches Patton within the hour. He sends a message to Eisenhower. 3 divisions. 3 days. Mission accomplished. Then he gets back to work because the battle is not over. The relief of Bastogne is just the beginning. German forces are still in the bulge, still dangerous, still fighting. But the momentum has shifted. Over the next 3 weeks, Third Army attacks relentlessly. They push the Germans back mile by mile, village by village, in temperatures that drop to -20 degrees, through snowstorms that ground aircraft and blind tank crews. They keep fighting. By January 16, 1945, the bulge is eliminated. The Germans have lost 100,000 men killed, wounded, or captured. They have lost 800 tanks. They have lost 1,000 aircraft. They have lost any hope of stopping the Allied advance. Third Army casualties during the Ardennes campaign. 50,000 men. Heavy, brutal. But they held, and they won. And Montgomery. When the German offensive began, Eisenhower temporarily placed Montgomery in command of American forces north of the Bulge. Montgomery's contribution to the battle. He waited. He prepared. He organized a defensive line. And then 3 weeks after Patton had already broken the siege and turned the tide, Montgomery finally launched his counterattack. He held a press conference afterward, took credit for stopping the German offensive, implied that American commanders had failed, and British leadership had saved the day. The American press was furious. Bradley threatened to resign. Patton called it the most outrageous lie of the war. Churchill was embarrassed. He addressed Parliament on January 18, 1945. The United States troops have done almost all the fighting and have suffered almost all the losses. Care must be taken not to claim for the British Army an undue share of what is undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war. It was the closest Churchill ever came to publicly rebuking Montgomery. In his private diary, Churchill was less diplomatic. He wrote on January 20th, 1945, "Patton relieved Bastogne in 3 days. Monty took 3 weeks to attack a weakened enemy. The contrast speaks for itself. Some men are born for war, others merely study it." The Battle of the Bulge proved everything Churchill had suspected after Market Garden. Montgomery was a capable administrator, a meticulous planner, a defensive specialist, but offensive warfare required something he did not possess: speed, aggression, the ability to act when the situation demanded action, not planning. Patton had it. Montgomery did not. The final statistics tell the story. Third Army from Normandy to the end of the war. 281 days of continuous combat. 606 miles advanced. 12,000 cities, towns, and villages liberated. 280. 688 enemy soldiers captured. 44. 500 enemy soldiers killed. Third Army casualties: 27. 104 killed. 86. 267 wounded. 18. 957 missing. Montgomery's 21st Army Group. Similar time period. Similar resources. 300 miles advanced. Far fewer prisoners. Far fewer enemy killed. And the lingering memory of Market Garden. The bridge too far. But the comparison between the two generals goes beyond statistics. It goes to the heart of what leadership means in war. Montgomery demanded certainty. He wanted guaranteed success before he would act. He wanted every supply in place, every contingency planned, every risk minimized. And because war never offers certainty, he often waited when he should have moved, hesitated when he should have struck, lost opportunities that bolder commanders would have seized. Patton embraced uncertainty. He understood that war is chaos, that plans never survive contact with the enemy, that the commander who acts fastest usually wins even if his plan is imperfect. Speed kills, he said. Not just enemies. Speed kills doubt. Speed kills hesitation. Speed kills defeat. Churchill understood this instinctively. He had been a cavalry officer in his youth. He had charged with the 21st Lancers at Omdurman. He knew that there are moments in battle when thinking must stop and action must begin. Montgomery never understood this. Patton understood nothing else. The legacy of this comparison shaped military thinking for generations. The contrast between Montgomery and Patton became a case study in war colleges around the world. It illustrated a fundamental truth. Resources do not win wars. Leadership does. The commander who can turn an army in 3 days will always defeat the commander who needs 3 weeks. But what happened to these men after the war? What became of the rivalry that Churchill ignited with his devastating comparison? And what final judgment did history render on the field marshal who lost 10,000 men for a bridge he never captured versus the general who crossed half of Europe with half the fuel? In Part 4, we will see the final chapter. The end of the war, the return home, the legacies that endure to this day, and Churchill's last word on the matter, written in his memoirs years later, a verdict that still stings British pride and still makes Americans proud. The story is almost over. But the most surprising revelation is yet to come. In Part 1, Churchill discovered the devastating truth about Market Garden. 10,000 British casualties for a bridge never captured. In Part 2, he confronted Montgomery in a showdown that shattered the field marshal's influence forever. In Part 3, we watched Patton achieve the impossible, turning an entire army in 48 hours to relieve Bastogne and break the back of Hitler's final offensive. But what happened after the guns fell silent? What became of these two generals, whose rivalry defined the Western Front? And what final verdict did history render on the man who lost everything versus the man who won everything with half the resources? This story has one last chapter, and it contains a twist that no one expected. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. The war in Europe is over. Nazi Germany has surrendered unconditionally. Allied forces occupy Berlin. Hitler is dead. And now the two generals who fought so bitterly for resources, for glory, for Churchill's approval, must face a different kind of battle. The battle for legacy. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery accepts the German surrender at Lüneburg Heath on May 4th. It is his moment of triumph. Photographers capture the scene. Newsreels play across Britain. Montgomery is a hero. The man who defeated Rommel in Africa. The man who led the D-Day ground forces. The man who accepted Germany's surrender. But those who know the truth see a different picture. They see a general who squandered 10,000 lives at Arnhem, a general who demanded priority and delivered failure, a general who took 3 weeks to counterattack at the Bulge while Patton did it in 3 days. The public sees a victor. The insiders see a man saved by politics rather than performance. Montgomery returns to Britain as a conquering hero. He is made Viscount Montgomery of Alamein. He receives the Order of the Garter. He becomes Chief of the Imperial General Staff, the highest position in the British Army. He writes his memoirs, which sell millions of copies. He lives until 1976, dying at age 88, wealthy, honored, and convinced until his last breath that he was the greatest general of the war. He never admits fault for Market Garden. In his memoirs, he calls it 90% successful. He blames everyone else. Intelligence failures, weather, the Polish paratroopers, American delays. Everyone except himself. When asked about Patton, Montgomery is dismissive. A good corps commander, he says, but not a strategic thinker, not someone who understood the big picture. The condescension is breathtaking considering the record. And Patton. His fate is very different. George Patton ends the war as the most successful combat commander in Allied history. Third Army has advanced farther, captured more prisoners, liberated more territory than any other force in Europe. When Germany surrenders, Patton's men are in Czechoslovakia, deeper into enemy territory than any other Allied unit. They would have kept going if Eisenhower had not ordered them to stop. But Patton does not fit into peacetime. He is too aggressive, too outspoken, too willing to say what he thinks, regardless of consequences. In the occupation of Germany, he makes comments about former Nazis that embarrass the army. He compares the denazification program to a witch hunt. He suggests that the real enemy is now the Soviet Union and that America should rearm the Germans to fight the communists. He is probably right about the Soviets, but he says it too loudly, too publicly. Eisenhower relieves him of command of Third Army in October 1945. Patton is given command of the 15th Army, a paper unit whose only job is to write the official history of the war. It is a demotion disguised as an assignment. Patton is devastated. He writes in his diary that he feels like a racehorse put out to pasture. He tells his wife that he should have died in battle. That would have been better than this slow death of irrelevance. December 9, 1945, near Mannheim, Germany. Patton is being driven to a pheasant hunting trip. His car is hit by a truck at low speed. It is a minor accident. No one else is seriously hurt, but Patton's neck snaps against the partition between the front and back seats. He is paralyzed from the neck down. For 12 days he lies in a hospital bed, unable to move. The most mobile general of World War II, the man who turned armies and crossed continents, cannot lift a finger. He knows he is dying. He tells his wife he is sorry. He wishes he had been killed in action. December 21, 1945. George Patton dies in his sleep. He is 60 years old. The news shocks the world. The man who survived countless battles, who stood in tank turrets under enemy fire, who led from the front in every engagement, dies in a car accident on a quiet German road. It seems impossible. It seems wrong. Patton is buried in the Luxembourg American Cemetery among the soldiers of Third Army who died in the Battle of the Bulge. He had asked to be buried with his men. It was his final request. His grave is simple. Just a white cross like all the others. No special monument, No elaborate tomb. But every day since 1945, visitors have come. Thousands every year. They stand before his grave and remember the general who believed that wars were won by moving forward, not by planning backward. The contrast in their endings tells us something profound about how the world treats its heroes. Montgomery, the cautious planner, who demanded certainty before acting, lived to 88 in comfort and honor. Patton, the aggressive warrior who embraced chaos and uncertainty, died at 60 in a hospital bed, paralyzed and heartbroken. The man who played it safe was rewarded. The man who took risks was destroyed. But legacy is not measured in years lived. It is measured in impact created. The lessons of Montgomery versus Patton have shaped military thinking for 80 years. Every war college in the world studies their contrasting approaches. Every military strategist grapples with the questions they embodied. When do you wait? When do you strike? How much risk is acceptable? When does caution become cowardice? When does aggression become recklessness? Montgomery represented the institutional approach. Gather resources. Plan meticulously. Minimize risk. Advance only when success is virtually guaranteed. It is the safe approach, the bureaucratic approach, the approach that protects careers and avoids embarrassment. Patton represented the warrior approach. Move fast. Accept uncertainty. Exploit opportunities before they disappear. Take calculated risks. Trust your instincts. It is the dangerous approach. The approach that wins wars but terrifies administrators. The military establishments of the world officially teach Montgomery's approach. They create planning frameworks and logistics systems and risk assessment matrices. They promote officers who follow procedures and avoid controversy. They build armies designed to fight the last war, not the next one. But when those armies face actual enemies, they discover what Churchill knew instinctively. Wars are won by Pattons, not Montgomerys. The plans fall apart. The logistics fail. The enemy does not cooperate. And in that chaos, only the commanders who can adapt and move and strike will prevail. The Gulf War of 1991 proved this. General Norman Schwarzkopf studied Patton obsessively. His left hook through the desert was pure Patton, a rapid armored thrust that destroyed the Iraqi army in 100 hours. The war planners had predicted 6 months of combat. Schwarzkopf ended it in 4 days. The invasion of Iraq in 2003 proved it again. The Thunder Run into Baghdad was Patton reborn armored columns racing through enemy territory so fast that Iraqi defenders could not react. 21 days from Kuwait to Baghdad. Faster than anyone thought possible. Every successful military campaign since World War II has followed Patton's principles, not Montgomery's. Speed, aggression, flexibility, the willingness to act on imperfect information rather than wait for certainty that never comes. But the lessons extend beyond warfare. In business, the same dynamic plays out. Companies that plan endlessly and demand certainty before acting are overtaken by competitors who move fast and adapt. Kodak planned carefully and died slowly. Amazon moved fast and conquered the world. The Montgomerys of the business world write detailed strategies. The Pattons ship products. In science, breakthrough discoveries come from researchers who pursue unconventional ideas despite institutional resistance. Every major innovation from penicillin to the internet was initially dismissed as impossible or impractical. The committees said no. The individuals did it anyway. In life itself, the pattern holds. Those who wait for perfect conditions never start. Those who demand guarantees never risk. Those who follow the safe path arrive safely at a destination no one remembers. Churchill understood this. He was himself a Patton, not a Montgomery. He had charged with cavalry at Omdurman. He had escaped from a prison camp in South Africa. He had defied the appeasers and led Britain alone against Nazi Germany when rational calculation said surrender was the only option. He recognized Patton as a kindred spirit, someone who understood that there are moments when thinking must stop and action must begin. And there is one final detail that most histories overlook, one twist that reveals the true depth of Churchill's judgment. In 1946, after the war ended, Churchill began writing his 6-volume history of the conflict. It would become a masterpiece, winning the Nobel Prize for Literature. In those volumes, Churchill assessed every major commander of the war. He praised some. He criticized others. He was diplomatic about most. But when he came to Montgomery and Patton, his words were carefully chosen to last. About Montgomery, Churchill wrote with measured praise. He called him a master of set-piece battle. He acknowledged his victory at El Alamein, but he also noted with devastating understatement that Montgomery was cautious in exploitation and slow in pursuit. For a military historian, those words are damning. They mean Montgomery could win battles but not campaigns. He could defeat enemies but not destroy them. About Patton, Churchill wrote something very different. He called him one of the most daring and successful of the Allied commanders. He noted his extraordinary feat at Bastogne. And then he added a sentence that military historians have quoted for decades. Patton was not afraid to be wrong. That quality more than any other made him formidable. Not afraid to be wrong. That is the essence of the difference. Montgomery was terrified of being wrong. He demanded certainty. He avoided risk. He protected his reputation above all else. And because he was never willing to be wrong, he was never truly great. Patton accepted that he might be wrong. He made decisions knowing they could fail. He acted on instinct, knowing his instincts could betray him. And because he was willing to be wrong, he was often spectacularly right. Churchill saw this clearly in September 1944 when he compared the two generals. He saw it even more clearly in December 1944 when Patton relieved Bastogne, and he ensured that history would see it too by writing it into his memoirs where it would be read for centuries. So what is the final verdict? From September 17th to September 25th, 1944, two generals fought the same war with different approaches. One received 100 to 400 tons of fuel per day and produced 10,000 casualties for zero strategic gain. The other received 700 tons and captured 12 cities, crossed 3 rivers, took 45,000 prisoners, and positioned himself to invade Germany. Montgomery lived 30 more years than Patton. He received more honors. He held higher positions. He died rich and comfortable and certain of his own greatness. But Patton won. He won because results matter more than reputation. He won because history remembers achievement, not caution. He won because Churchill's comparison that September morning in 1944 told the truth that everyone could see but few dared speak. Some generals have it. Most do not. If you know other stories of underdogs who defied the establishment and changed history, share them in the comments. This is just one of hundreds of moments when a single decision, a single comparison, a single truth spoken aloud altered the course of the war. Subscribe to discover more hidden stories from history's greatest conflict. Because the official histories tell you what happened, but the real stories tell you why. George Patton once said that a good plan violently executed today is better than a perfect plan executed next week. He lived that truth. He died that truth. And 80 years later, that truth still separates those who merely exist from those who actually win. The greatest tragedy is not that Patton died young. It is that Montgomery lived long enough to convince himself he was right. He never was.